Well, this is the M1 and heading northwards, and then as I look this way it's going towards Staples Corner eventually. So this is the remnants of Edgwarebury Lane, or at least the sort of slightly rejigged version, and I'm looking towards what is Edgware in the distance. It's New Year's Day. Just had a bit of a walk, and now I'm walking back to whence I came. So this is sort of greenbelt land. Now I don't know whether I've done a video on this before. I'm pretty sure I haven't. I've certainly done an article about it, which I'll put in the comments at the end in the description. But this is where the Suburbia meets the countryside, or at least some semblance of it. And if the greenbelt hadn't happened, they probably would have just carried on building out this way. So I'll break this video up a little. It's a shame about the fly tipping that's here. But a particularly interesting view out into the distance there. You can see the arch for Wembley Stadium in the distance. I'll just close in on that. You should be able to see that there. I'll just let those people go past. Give them a bit of privacy. These trucks I can't remember them being parked here before when I've walked up here, but there you go. So I see some businesses nearby. So I've always enjoyed coming up on this walk. I mean, this end of it's a bit scrappy because there is quite a lot of fly tipping, but it is just I always find it quite sort of poetic, really, in some ways. If you forgive me going off on a flight of fancy, but it is very much where the building stopped in terms of Edgware, and in the distance you might not be able to make it out, but there's some houses, and that's the end of Edgwarebury Lane in terms of where it was built upon. But it's quite nice. There's lots of old trees out here and farmland and some horses. But it's a bit of sort of countryside, a little bit of countryside. And over in this where I've just come from would take you over to Elstree and Bournemouth. There's some horses and a pony, a horse and a pony. Hello. Please keep that. Always slightly respectful of the fact that yes, this is it's sort of private land, but you're allowed to walk through it. There's remnants of what this area, which was outside of Edgware, was like, what it would have been like before they started building lots and lots of houses in the 1920s and 30s when the underground came out this way. This is a particularly interesting sort of viewpoint because it does allow you to see literally the end of where the housing stops on Edgwarebury Lane. So that's in the distance. So I'll just close in on it now. I'll just do a quick zoom. Those white houses that you can see, that is the end of the built up bits of Edgwarebury Lane. So we take a turn. Now I think the original Edgwarebury Lane went off in that direction, but then they put a bit there which took you through to Barnet Lane eventually. So you've got a few sort of properties down here which are, they're described as farmhouses, but I think they are effectively really just residential. But the one that's most notable is the one that I'll come up to next, which is Bury Farm. And that is has an association with goodness me, the famous Dick Turpin, or infamous Dick Turpin, was the site of one of his earliest escapades, which wasn't particularly nice. Some more horses here, so I shall get to that in a second. So the lonely stump of a tree with the winter sun, getting poetic again, and an aircraft flying over. And, which I quite like, the sound of sparrows in the hedges and the trees, which is a sound you don't really get now in built-up areas in London. Not so much. You used to. It's almost like they're being sort of forced out into what they would consider to be a more natural environment. So these buildings here are to do with Bury Farm, which is it's a sort of horse riding place. Stabling, but it would have been a farm going right back into the, I suppose, the 1600s, something like that. Need to be more exact with my dates. So yes, there we go. And the farmhouse, the old farmhouse building, is at the end there. So parts of that will date back hundreds of years. The exact number of hundreds I don't know exactly here, but I'm sure I can put a link. There's a dovecote there. That structure there is a dovecote. Doves would be, I suppose, so back into Edgwarebury Lane. This is the original path of Edgwarebury Lane. Mixing things up, path and lane. And we're walking towards eventually where the houses on the sort of suburbanised Edgwarebury Lane are. It's quite nice, like, I have to say, quite a nice little scene there with the rather milky sun. So the time is 11:15 in the morning on New Year's Day 2026, first day of 2026. It doesn't really require too much waffle for me, really, which I'm probably grateful for, as I'm not exactly being very exact with my details. Another sort of sign of outward progress or inward into the countryside is over in the distance there. You can see those structures which are over towards Edgware proper. Nice old oak trees there. Catching a bit of wind there, noise sound there, but this is, I quite like this with these descending trees. Very windy all of a sudden. You know, the lonely house, which obviously, that's to do with something like usage. Vehicles. This makes for quite an interesting selection of signs. Public bridle way to Elstree, which should be pointing over that sort of way. Edgwarebury Farm, private road, private no parking. So it's all a little bit like, you're in no doubt that to be cautious and not to treat it as though it's you can do what you want. Just stick to the path, as they say. Another public bridleway to Bushfield Crescent, which takes you out sort of eventually to sort of 30s housing. But at that point, it's at this point here, it becomes less of an issue, and you are a bit more feel like you're in civilization of sorts. So on this side of the road here, there are some cemeteries, which are Jewish cemeteries. Which have been there for quite some time, and in fact I think it's over on that side there where Amy Whitehouse is buried. If I got that wrong, I'm sorry. And that's the view out back towards where I started. Yeah, you can just make out in the distance there. Just zoom in on it. Yeah, that's turning into the cemetery, which I probably won't film out of respect, really. So we're getting towards the end of the bit that's out in the countryside, so to speak, rather laughably, because it is just fringes. It's the hinterland. And so these houses here that you can see, that is the end of the suburban sprawl that came out in the 30s, although of course these two houses on the end, much like many of the houses now, are not in their original state, and they've been sort of modernised. There are less kind words to use for what some people do to their houses, but it's entirely their business. I've learned to accept that rather than being critical, and when all said and done, there's rather a lot of original 30s housing that exists, so it's not like it's all gone. So there's the sign, public bridleway to Elstree, and then just give you that view as it went out towards Elstree. In fact, I don't know whether I can pick this up. Let's see if I can. I meant to mention that there is a building in the very far distance which looks like Tudor Beaton. I don't know whether you can make it out. Just try and point over my finger, just about there. That should be Edgwarebury Manor, if I'm right, which has appeared in numerous British films throughout the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. And if you go to a site called Real Streets, that's all one word, and you put into, just do a search, Real Streets, Edgwarebury Manor, then you will find a whole lot of references to it. Great website, that. So on this walk of sorts, this is the bit that I love the most, because you've got this last house, but it's this bit here, and I've mentioned this in the article, it's where the pavement comes to a really abrupt end, and that's it. And that's like, for me, that's the end of Suburbia. Suburbia sort of halted that interwar period where it just came to an end. Yeah, that's the end of the pavement. And these houses here, so it's not on both sides, but because I think there's another entrance to a cemetery on that side over there. But these are all would have originally been built. Some of them may have actually escaped and gone into sort of the 50s, but the majority of them are built in the sort of mid-30s, and they may almost certainly have been built by a company called Langs, L-A-I-N-G, John Langs, who were based, their offices were based in Mill Hill, not that far away. They're the same building company is responsible for building quite big chunks of Cannons Park, and indeed bits of Boreham Wood, and in particular the industrial estates of Boreham Wood they were responsible for. So you've got a spare plot of land there where something wasn't built, which makes me think that perhaps these ones here are after the war, and this is where the interwar bit stopped. So we're still on the old Edgwarebury Lane, and if you were to have a look at maps, the NLS maps, the National Library of Scotland's overlay maps on their website, you can do overlays, you can see the past and the present together, and you'll be able to see how Edgwarebury Lane sort of continued. I mean, that countryside bit that I just come from, that's the sort of remnant of its sort of past. The rest of it was all built beside. I mean, the actual path itself of the lane is the same, but there's houses and developments the whole length as you go back in to Edgware. And I'm not going to do that walk, because to be honest with you, that's going to be quite dull, because it's just lots of 30 suburban houses. You can see the trees were left behind, and they'll be old. I don't know exactly how old, but they'll predate the houses. It's interesting. You see, look, that's how you get a difference in these very, very interwar houses. Some of them in more of an original state than others. But like I said, that's what people do. They buy a house and they decide they want to do their own thing with it, and they're completely entitled to do that, no matter what people might say. And I used to be a bit like that, you know, I was terrible. But at the end of the day, that's their decision. It's nice when people do restore buildings back to how they were, but there again, it does add a bit of sort of difference, because when this lot were built, they all look very similar. There's some difference, and they did that deliberately just to sort of break it up. But yeah, when they were first built, they would have all been of a similar sort of style with their front gardens, and now everything's very, very, very different indeed. It's all changed. So I'm wondering, have I actually missed my turning? I think I have. So this carries on, and somewhere down there, there's a few houses that have got their original Crittall style windows. But not today for me on that one. But what I'm doing is I'm just walking back because I missed the turning. It's where it came out of, because it takes you through to Edgwarebury Park, which is worth a mention, to be honest with you. Yeah, so this is the entrance to Edgwarebury Park. Just going to go through the gates there. London Borough Barnet, which is where we are. So the initial bit of this, as you come in, is quite sort of relaxed in terms of, you know, not being a formal laid out, but as you progress through, you then join up with the park as it would have been originally put out in the, I suppose, the 30s. That's the 1930s, as we are actually getting very close to the 2030s now. See, it's going to be a problem, isn't it? Even now, you see, you can't say the 20s because we're in the 20s. You see old sign there, say old, that's from what, 1998? So when this bit was done, which is done as a sort of less formal setting out with sort of wilding, I think really is the best way to describe it, where it wasn't quite so formal. And to go through there. Yeah, so I mean, basically we're now off Edgwarebury Lane, so I'm slightly sort of outside the remit of this video, but it's fine. It's a bit of additional stuff to put in. But what I'll do is, so this is the bit that they just sort of didn't bother too much with. But I will probably just put in a bit towards the end of showing you the park itself.